thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I think it's a great idea, and it's wonderful to be on. The slight problem is, of course, you asked me to kind of think back to a talk I've given previously, and then almost the first person I see is Terry, who's probably heard it about 5 times. But actually, it isn't exactly that talk. Whoops! Now I've disappeared. Have I gone off? No. I want to try to get the to get my PowerPoint up. So this should work, I hope. And I press share. I think that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, that's working, Nick. Yeah, just need to start your PowerPoint and it's over to you.
Right, amazing. Well, I'm sorry I look as if I'm in a very dark room. This is my shack. Could explain why I don't make any QSOs probably. Perhaps I can't see the keyboard. Anyway, to get back to the topic in hand, I'm going to talk about doing DX for not too much money. It's never no money, but it's also somewhat from the point of view of actually doing DX from the other end of the QSO. But a lot of connections, I think. I mean, just explaining briefly, I live in near Canterbury. I live in a conservation area. That's something that wonderful that was willed upon me. So I can't put up beams on any kind of permanent basis. I've got quite a large garden, which is really good. I've also got telephone connections over ground, and I've got mains over ground. They're not quite so good, particularly since the telephone connection is exceedingly long. But apart from that, I do okay. But I've also done a great deal of working from overseas. In fact, if I looked at the number of QSOs I've made over the last years, probably made more in the last 10 years from overseas than in the rest put together. Anyway, let's see if that works. Yes, now I've improved my picture from yesterday, Nick. I hope this is right. I believe this is the original Pi factory. Is it correct? And you used to meet there. Anyway, I will assume it is and bash on. Slight adjustment of the title. I'm not quite sure what exact words we're going to be, but there we are. Anyway, so there's my call sign, as you can work out. I mean, I remember when I was first licensed, G2s used to be terribly rude about G3s, and now it's the other way around. So there we are. Now I've had quite a lot of call signs, as you can see. This is not going to be a bragathon. I think I promised, but just to explain, and it's really nice to hear that Tom's there from South Africa, but unlike quite a lot of people who've worked DX from outside the UK, quite a lot of those call signs I've spent a reasonable amount of time in. So just nipping along them. 901, that's Sierra Leone, and I was there for a full year, and I've been back a couple of times much more recently. 5Z4LS, I lived there for 2 years, and I've been there quite a lot of times. The last time was 2018. 5X1 NH, well, from 2007 to my last time there, 2017, I've worked something like 110,000 QSOs from there. So I've been around a while, but I actually was working as a volunteer. 7P8NH, I was there for 3 days. And finally 9X0, which is Rwanda. I've done 4 fortnight sort of sessions, and the ones below are kind of holiday arrangements, but often from the same spot. So I just kind of give that as a bit of background. So a lot of this DXing is, as it were, from that side into the UK, but also lessons that I've learned, I guess, apply here as well. I hope you will agree when I get to the end. Let us move on. Now, I do apologise, particularly to Tom, to show you a map of Africa, but I'm going to mention a few places, and I have found over the course of giving talks, a lot of people have no idea where Africa is. Indeed, the benefits of those on from North America, 1 or 2 people have asked me whether Africa was a country. So, well, it is. There's lots of countries. So Sierra Leone, I mentioned, is there. Kenya is there. I'm hoping you can see this. Uganda is right next door. Rwanda is there. Then down to the south, South Africa, Namibia. I have been to Botswana. Lesotho, operated from there as well. So that's my kind of my connections with with Africa. And my background was first as a teacher. I stopped teaching in 1974, and then I worked in the management of education, and I stopped being on anybody's payroll, hooray, in 2001. So that's when amateur radio took quite a burst forward, if the truth were known. And all that stuff. I'm sorry, I've forgotten to press the right button to get the audio to come around. Not sure I can do it now. There's not much audio, so I will just carry on. Anyway, not many people have had the privilege of seeing me at the age of 19, but as you can see, I've been a skinflint for a very long time in terms of spending money. So coming from my home in Leeds at that time, there's the connection. I went to Sierra Leone in 1963 as a volunteer, PSO volunteer, and that's really where I got into DX working, and also doing things relatively cheaply, if at all possible. I mean, I suppose the ultimate in going somewhere to do amateur radio is to take absolutely nothing, and that's exactly what I did to Sierra Leone. I took nothing with me except my license, I guess, and people lend me things, and I lent me things. I went on other people's radios, and I borrowed a receiver, and somebody lent me a Geloso VFO, and I put an amplifier on that, and so I could work from home as well. And that was great. Those were great times. And as I say, I did that for absolutely nothing. So I'm sure that would be generally appreciated. I can't say I've actually beaten that record since, but some of you may have seen that in Radcom. It probably deserves to be hidden in the archive somewhere, but that was the Sierra Leone Radio Society in 1964. Funny bunch in the bush, really. Those of you who read Radcom a lot in the back row, wearing the sort of bluey shirt, that's Peter Dodd, sadly a silent key, but he was you know, he wrote in Radcom for years about antennas, and if you thought my that effort was quaint, you should have seen Peter's. He made himself a two element beam entirely out of bamboo. I used to walk past it regularly and think, I cannot believe that, but anyway, seemed to do good stuff for him. So I'm just giving a bit of background. I should also explain another talk which I'm glad to say you're not being lumbered with tonight is about being an amateur. If you're a CDXC member, you may have heard that one. I am absolutely an amateur. So if you want to talk about meteor scatter and all sorts of other things like that, you'll find I'm severely lacking. But I have a long time in amateur radio, and I'm sort of self-taught, but haven't even got O-level physics, but I have got a history degree, so that's really useful. Anyway, roll it forward. That's kind of where things kind of got started from, and then I went to university, and then I went to Kenya. That's my station in Kenya. I put all of my 21st birthday present into the KW2000, and somewhere along the line, I got that terrible linear on the right-hand side, which still worries me when I think about it, because it was totally unstable. But anyway, I was on the air from Kenya for 2 years as 5Z4LS, and what I didn't take with me was antennas, and I built a cubical quad. I heard somebody earlier on talking about cubical quads, but I think a number of elements suggest something more than HF, and mine was just for 10 and 15. Some bands, of course, weren't even in existence at that time, and I taught myself a bit of welding in order to build it. So I'm quite versatile. So that gave me a kind of background to enjoying doing DX, and also not doing it on that huge scale. I suppose one thing that led me to give this talk originally was the fact that I see so regularly enormous DXpeditions looking for huge sums of money, most of which, to be fair, they supply themselves. That's really important. But you know, if you haven't got a ship and you're not in the Southern Oceans, you're not cutting your way through ice and living in a sort of mini village of tents with interlaced transceivers, then you aren't doing DX. I mean, I really strongly feel that there's a huge place in DX for people working each other wherever they are in the world, because where you are in the world is the interesting thing. And quite a lot of people in the not so exotic and not so looked after places are also interesting to many newcomers. I mean, that seems to be rather forgotten. So the places I've been are not rare. They're just, but they are interesting, and that's enough for me in itself. And also, I mean, I do absolutely love Africa. So just thought I'd let you share with thought of what a funeral's like in Ghana. It's a wonderful name, I thought. That was taken by a German in Sierra Leone. He claimed he was taking a picture of his ladder feet. I don't believe him. And I just love this, stuck on a door. It's just so logical and so lovely. And I always smile a great deal when I go to Africa. I love it. Anyway, thrift for the gardeners among you. Here we are, the thrift plant. Just for those who really aren't gardeners. How do we make it thrifty? Well, wherever I go, I try to find reasonable accommodation, not to pay too much money. That sadly is Uganda, or I think it's now been bulldozed, and there's a Chinese cobalt mine there, which may tie up with other things you've read in the newspapers. But you can stay in very expensive places, but you can also stay in very reasonable places. So the sort of places I've stayed in, Rwanda, for example, was a without alcohol bed and breakfast, which after the time I'd finished, did start stocking beer in the fridge, which was quite reasonable. But I haven't gone for massively wonderful hotels normally. I try to do it on a pretty reasonable basis, because actually it's very interesting and people want to help you do what you're doing, and it's a lot of fun. Now, you do need to choose your airline with care. I just love this picture. I've got a few like it, actually. Why do I say that? Well, if you want to go and work DX from abroad at a reasonable price, you do need to pick your way through the airlines. It's not just whether their planes will work, although that is an important factor. There's a few airlines which are probably to be avoided, but things like how much luggage do they let you take? A lot of airlines to Africa, in particular, allow a double baggage allowance, even when you're traveling tourist class, cattle class, or whatever you care to call it. And some of them are awkward about lengths of poles and all sorts of things like that. And you need to choose who you're traveling with. KLM's pretty good. East African Airways, gracious. I was talking about it. Kenya Airways is are pretty good, and I have used British Airways, but I had a bit of a dust up with British Airways about the weight of my luggage once, and I'm slightly disappointed by that. But anyway, you get the general drift. The other thing, of course, if you want to save money, both in whether in this country or whether you're traveling, you need to try and cut down on weight. So I'm quite obsessive about that. If you came and looked around my shack, you'd find a large number of things that when you turn them over, it tells you what their weight is, even down to the last gram, so I can kind of add them up even when I haven't got scales. So I've got lightweight kit. I suppose the other thing which has made it so much easier to do amateur radio at a reasonable price, whatever people may say, is actually the cost of radio equipment. And I'm sure if we're kind of honest, we notice that. I mean, I think I paid £100 for my KW2000 in 1965 or 6, somewhere around there, I suppose. Well, that would be one mighty big transceiver if you kind of jack that up to today's prices. So radios have become cheaper. So that must be good news to all Yorkshiremen, but also lots of other people besides. I'm not a Yorkshireman, by the way, but I do plead the. I wish to let you know that I'm a Geordie, so I'm completely out of position here down in Kent. But the other thing, of course, is the kind of radios that have been produced. The picture you saw earlier on of us strange-looking Mzungus in the bush in Sierra Leone. I mean, those sharp-eyed collectors of antiques may have spotted a DX40 in there, and also that chrome line that you get on an AR-88. I have another picture, which I didn't show you today, of people carrying those, and a fine little line of people they did make. And suddenly the appearance of lightweight rigs just made a huge change, and that's really what got me into DXing at low cost. And then, of course, moved on from radios like the FD857, which is one I had for quite a long time. Not a great competition rig, but actually such a rugged little item. It's I've carted all over the place and cooked in deserts and all of that sort of stuff till some light-fisted, light-fingered person took it away from me in Kenya in 2000 and something, 6 I think it was. Anyway, that's when I discovered Elecraft, and most of the stuff I have now is Elecraft. Now, Elecraft now has become relatively expensive, but it wasn't when I bought the K2, which is here, and which I actually made, which is a great achievement for fumble fingers, no technical training, Henwood. That cost about £650, I think, which was pretty good because it's a kind of all-featured rig. And then, of course, now there's the very small things like the KX2. They're not wildly cheap, but you can actually get very high spec radios these days for quite a reasonable price, I would suggest. But that's somebody older and with deeper pockets speaking rather than a teenager, I would agree. You can't get R107s and 12 sets anymore. You can't even get 19 sets, but there we are. I've moaned enough for today. For going on de-expeditions at minimum weight on your own, you have to assume that things are going to work largely, because you won't find anywhere to go and buy them. So that's just about all I take with me. I had to add the lower picture because I didn't used to take a multimeter with me, but in the end I decided that really was stupid. And Nigel, who some of you will know, G3RWF, he said, you've got to put cable clips in. You more or less build your station with those, don't you? So I put some of those in, and also started taking a soldering iron, but I've never actually used a soldering iron. You've got to assume it's going to work, and if you're in doubt, take something else. That's not really a cheap way of doing things, is it? Anyway, just to give you a rough idea, I just put this in because if you think you can buy things, you can't. I mean, it's going to be cheap because you can't buy them. You try wandering into one of those and say, have you got any you know, multi-core solder, or what about some PL259s? You'd be lucky. It's a lovely place for Portal, I love it, but as you can see, it's fairly straightforward. Now, really moving to the kind of the main bit of where I think there's a terrific interplay between people who go places and people like myself who have got quite a lot of restrictions on antennas, and even more so people who live in houses with small gardens, and particularly with lots of neighbours. I'm almost invisible, I believe. I won't say it, but I haven't had one of those knocks on the door, and I've been here for 36 years. So that the answer is stay off the air, of course. So that's what that's my kind of basic bit. I don't know if that's really I use all those bits even here at home. I mean, I wouldn't say what they are because people have come up to me at talks and said, what are they? I mean, that's a 10-meter fishing pole, whatever you care to call them. Get them from SOTA and all those sorts of places. That's also a 10-meter pole. Lots more bits. You get that from DXWire in Germany. Brilliant firm, by the way. Oh, I'm probably in danger of advertising since this is being broadcast, but I mean, they get stuff too quicker than people in the UK. Those are great little item. Nylon straps. They're really good if you're up a pole somewhere trying to tie an antenna on and you're the only person there. I'm also a great fan of enormous Jubilee clips for tying almost anything to anything. They do work quite well. And then finally, this is, of course, a catapult, which is ideal for getting antennas up reasonably high. There's a slight problem if you're traveling, because the X-ray machine doesn't show a good shape there, so I usually try and pack other things around it. Sorry, there we go. Over time, I've realised it's useful to have some aluminium around, and I worked out for 4.38 kilos, you can have a 26-foot pole, which is quite useful. I guess they're pretty useful around the house as well. And coming to the question of what choice of antenna there, and that's where I come back to what might you want to do at home. And this is where I'm sure you will be doing amateur radio for years and years and years largely, which of course is a strength and a bit of a comment on our hobby all at the same time. But I'll just give you some indication of where I've found antennas which are cheap and which produce good results. The first one is that straight vertical, and if you haven't tried fishing poles, and a lot of people haven't, strangely, they are brilliant value, and I stuck that in because it's a lovely picture. Well, it's a very nice picture. It's right on the sea edge, on the edge of the sea, and it's facing west from South Africa. It's up the other Atlantic coast, by the way, and that was pretty good. The only trouble was I chose the only place in South Africa, I think, probably where there was a hill to the north, so I couldn't really hear Europe, but I could hear South America, and that's such a joy. They sound like the Russians were about 50 years ago. That's good for long path America, long path US, but not terribly good for anything else. But that's what happens when you hire a house from on the internet. But straightforward, vertical, particularly for 40 or 30 meters, but actually you can use them as a basis for an elevated ground plane just as well. And they don't cost much money, and they're very durable. They're very strong unless you stand on them. And there's a terrible crunching and heart-wrenching feeling if you stand on them, because that's it really. Although I do have ways of mending them, and that's why my instant glue is in the kit you saw earlier. That's another vertical, difficult to see really. That's quite a smart hotel, I have to confess. But I have to explain, that was our nearest hotel 25 miles away from where we lived in the 1960s. So I've been back a few times for old times' sake. Now, what about NFEDs with ATUs? I don't use those. I don't find ATUs much help generally, particularly if you're kind of traveling solo, whether you're trying to work off a beach in Scotland or wherever. I would always prefer to take an antenna. Here we go. Put it the wrong way around. Yes, antenna analyzer, and that's my current one, because they're just brilliant. And also, that does so much for you if you're trying to get your antenna to work when you've taken it somewhere, as it were. Anyway, I've used the dipole a lot, so people say, "Oh, come on. Dear me, how boring." But actually, I do think people tend to ignore the dipole and use more complicated arrangements, wonderful, magical antennas which have no scientific reason for working, like the joystick, for example. Anybody remember the joystick? There are some more modern ones, but I won't mention the names because it might be embarrassing if you bought one. But I hope it's working for you. I tend to use almost everywhere inverted V dipole, only needs one support, and it's got links on it. You can probably just about see the links. So that actually works on every HF band. It doesn't look elegant, does it? And it isn't straight, and it's lashed to a water tower, but it works. And I think I would say the first thing about trying to work DX for very little money is think about how you can get your antenna up just as high as you possibly can, because it's so difficult if they're lower down, obviously. That's the same antenna in Rwanda. You see this inelegant, cheap way I have. That's a 20-something foot bit of alley, and that's a pole, and it's up at about 40 odd feet, and it's actually in quite a nice location as well, but works really well. That's the inverted V dipole again. We'll talk about that in a moment. That's a bit more ambitious, but that's cheap. That's a cheap antenna. And the reason, if you wonder why on earth is the feeder looking like that, that's because it's on the halyard. So I could actually take it up and pull it up and down, even in the dark, usually, unless it caught on something. Now, my methods of construction are also sophisticated and very cheap. Somebody claimed to have built an antenna using a chopping board a couple of years back. I've been using chopping boards for quite a long time. So that's the way I make centerpieces of dipoles with a choke ballon. I never quite know whether choke ballons work, but I think they do actually if you've got earthing problems in particular. Changing the band, pull out an automotive clip. And if you're desperate for an insulator, well, you can always use a bottle. Now, this is getting really cheap. You don't even need to buy that bottle. Although I did give a talk somewhere and somebody came up to me at the end and said, what kind of bottle was that you were using? I said, how do you mean? He said, oh, it depends what plastic they're made of as to whether they're really good. I said, well, you're beyond me. It didn't burn. And also, if you want to do things cheaply and in a hurry, well, the kind of terminal block to a PL259 is quite a good bodge. Another cheap antenna, which you could put up in any house, anywhere, is that's a tri-band dipole, and that's for 10, 15, and 10 because I've used it for the Commonwealth contest. But I mean, that works extremely well, and I made that from scrap. These are the very top section of a roach pole, so the very thin bit, which you have got limited use if you're trying to use it to support anything. The wire's exceedingly thin. This is monofill fishing line. This was the hotel's flagpole, I think. Actually, unfortunately, haven't got a rope on it, but I solved that problem for them. They're probably now flying a flag on it. So that's another good cheap antenna that will work DX, and the answer is get it up high. And actually, if you put it in that inverted V shape, there's an extremely good match to a 50 ohm coax. I just stuck that in because Rwanda at night's rather beautiful. Actually, I think it was dawn, come to think of it. I put that slide was in. That was really good. If you've still got one of those, they're great, aren't they? I mean, I don't know how I ever did without one, but unfortunately that finally got dropped just too many times. And my new one, which I kind of waved at you earlier, is it's so much better in terms of battery consumption. You could almost hear the volts disappearing on those. Now, here's the question. That's all very well, and you can work DX, of course, if you're quite a weak signal. In fact, people can work QRP, of course, and some of you do, I'm sure. But there comes a time when you probably want to be heard in challenging conditions, if I can put it that way, perhaps in a contest. And I've used this card before. Nigel, G3RWF, I think he took it in good heart, but that was on one of his expeditions for the Commonwealth contest. I thought my bit of wire hanging on a flagpole was slightly below that. But anyway, I'm going to talk about how you can try and get your signal louder. And that, of course, applies here as much as anywhere else. Well, obviously, one thing you can do is go and buy linear. If you've got somewhere between £2,000 and £5,000, you can buy linear. Or I did see a 5 kilowatt linear somewhere. I won't say where, but there are such things as do exist. It's the amount of loss in the feeder was incredible, really. To think go to 5 kilowatts of 400 watts, quite extraordinary. So you can buy linear. That's true. Linears are expensive. Sometimes running more power is a problem in terms of interference, can be. And if you're going somewhere, the linear is very heavy in your suitcase, unless, of course, you buy one of the switch mode power supply linears that are around now. But only the Italian one, I think, has got a antenna tuner in it to match the antenna, which is so important with the linear. It's more of that. So here are some thoughts. Well, got to be careful about putting up large antennas, particularly if you put up thin ones and they're not very good. So some thoughts from me. Well, this was a desperate effort. Cypress House, could be your house, wherever you are. In Yorkshire, perhaps. You can use plastic drain pipe. I would just say that if you get a really hot day, in Cyprus and it's over 40 degrees, you will find it just does what that antenna before does, which is to bend over. But it is a desperate way of getting an antenna higher up, and there's the old inverted V yet again. So I moved on. A relatively cheap antenna, certainly was, and you can probably buy the second hand, is a spider beam. Now you might say, why on earth did you put your spider beam there? What a mess. Look at all those other wires. Well, I won't go into the details of why it was there, except it was an antenna for CQWWCW. But sometimes the way in which you can get a stronger signal is by getting on top of something else. And that was, I think, the 11th story of that hotel. And straight about 30 degrees roundabout it was take off over the sea. So that was a good location. So you can maybe be able to do the same thing. My antenna here in my house, which is it's just bits and pieces really. It's 60 feet to the top, and the last 30 feet are actually from the house roof rather than, well, it's not quite true. They're from the house roof, but in fact the pole goes right down to ground level, so I can in fact drop it down by taking sections out of it from below. Hope you can understand what I'm talking about. So here's another idea, and again you need some room for this. But this is my own garden here. I mentioned I'm in a conservation area, but I thought, well, there's nothing to stop me putting up a beam antenna for the odd weekend for contests or things like that. So this is what I did in the first 4 weeks of lockdown. So that's 40 feet, and the antenna on the top is a Moxon 2-element 20-meter beam. And that is made with only with swaged sections, aluminium sections, 2-inch. Those are fishing poles and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And it's got a gin pole, and I can put that up with one hand without any difficulty at all. And I would just recommend that to you. I've now located places round about the garden where I can put the guys, so I can rush around the back of the house, put that in place and haul it up and have a beam aerial, which otherwise I would not be able to have. Now, when sunspots return, assuming they will, 50 meters and 10 meters are really easy to put up. 20 is a bit more of a handful, not in terms of weight particularly, but because of the size, and they're trying to kind of grab you. But I'll talk a bit more about Moxons in a moment. But if you want about 5 or 6 dBs of gain, which is after all what you'll get from a linear, and front to back ratio somewhere between 16 and about 20 dBs, Moxons are great. The antenna on the top there cost me less than £100. I hope you think that's reasonable. It certainly is compared with anything very aluminium and rather more exotic. That is the same mast. It used to be 11 meters tall. I've made it taller, and that's got the spider beam on it. But again, you can get that up and down one person. So it's only about 11 meters. I've taken that to various places. My own garden. I've taken it to the west coast of Scotland, and it's been to Kenya a couple of times, and it works exceedingly well. So if you're looking for a cheap way of getting your antenna up and you've got space to actually do that, I would recommend just making something quite simple like that. Plenty of stuff in the books about it, and I think you'll find it'll make a huge difference. It's about height. If you look on the internet and you look at DXpeditions, you'll see some very expensive DXpeditions that have put spider beams on one 20-foot length of pipe. I've got to say, that's really spoiling the ship. You need to get higher up than that. 11's kind of about minimum, I'd say. That's this was fairly cheap. This is a traveling hex beam, German brand. Works okay, and that you can still buy them. Mine unfortunately has now died. I eventually killed it. One of the arms broke off, and I thought I'd had enough of it. It also gradually looked more and more peculiar. But as a cheap, portable, short-term antenna, which is what I'm saying is another way of doing DX, it's pretty good. The other thing, of course, is find a beam where you're going if you're going somewhere else. That's a very cheap way of doing it. That's in Kenya, unfortunately, no longer there because it got ransacked and stolen. I just put that in because I just like reminding myself of how nice Western Uganda is. Right, single band 2-element Moxon. Well, you've seen it already. Here we are lashed to this water tower. I improved on that over time, but there you can see another. I'll show you the Moxon, the actual kind of construction of a Moxon in a moment. But that is so light, really, really light. Just I think the whole of the antennas, something like 2.5 kilos, something like that. It's very light. So cheap and light, everything. There it is again, this time in Scotland. And that's again on the 11-meter mast. And it's a good, cheap antenna, which you can make yourself. And it's not difficult to make. There's plenty of stuff on the internet about making it. That's if you haven't come across the Moxon, I guess a lot of you will have done, but that's basically the shape. That's the radiating element, as it were. So you feed it there, and this is the reflector, and then then there is an insulator there in the sides. What are the advantages? It's very small. If you can see, if you put a mast there, it's actually, turning circles not great. I usually make it so that there are poles coming out that way, up. I've given myself away. Come along. What am I doing? Hang on. Sorry. Apologies. Yeah, I usually, so I pole there, poles there, and there, and I put one out there, a shortened one, which I attach the feeder to, and a choke ballon, and then one out the back, and I usually paint this one so you can see it at night, so you can tell which direction it's pointing. Logical, huh? And that's the center of it. Again, as you can see, dead cheap, very cheap aluminium angle iron, a collection of quite weary looking poles by this stage. And then I've got a kind of arrangement above it, which just they go to the ends of the spreaders in order to make it look tiny, but actually 15 and 10 meters using only 1mm wire, it doesn't sag a lot. So there's the choke ballon. Why is a blue plastic bag? It's to stop the connector getting wet. And it does work. I'm telling you, the Moxon can go into interesting and strange shapes. And but as somebody said to me, if they can hear you, it doesn't matter. They can't see it, but it isn't supposed to look like that. That's the Catherine wheel version. What am I doing? That's what it's supposed to look like, but I've got to say that was beyond me. Now, just one last antenna, which you may have heard of, you may have tried. This is the dipole array, vertical dipole array, which has been used very successfully, particularly by people going to the Pacific, because it's got I mean, getting dipoles up is fine, but then you're also interested in the end in low angles of radiation if you want to work that super far distant DX. You can get that by putting your beams way up, but here's a way of getting really low angle radiation and a great signal from what is effectively a Moxon, a vertical Moxon. And here it is with its feet in the in a Scottish loch. I swore I wouldn't tell the person whose house I stayed in which loch it was, believe it or not. So it's fed, yeah, it's fed here. So that's the radiating element, and that's the reflector. So it's firing that way, and you won't need to take the feeder off at right angles. Again, very cheap. That's the old chopping board. These are roach poles, roach pole, and cheap copper wires, if you like. And you just need to find a place where when the sea comes in, it can be above water, because it really needs to be salt water. So if you live anywhere near, and actually my memory of geography suggests, particularly your part of Yorkshire hasn't got a huge amount of salt water too close. But I went up to Scotland and used that, and it was great fun. It really worked terribly well. I only used less than 100 watts because we were generator driven, and we had a great weekend. But just another shot of it. So just some ideas there on antennas, which I found useful in being cheap and DXing without taking the world and its wife and the Braveheart and all those other things with me. What about modes? You will realise, some of you will be sitting there thinking, God, this is so old-fashioned, and I apologise for that. I guess I am old-fashioned, that's true. Also, in the last couple of years, I've gone to places and looked at animals rather than taking radios with me. Well, that's not quite true. I went to Kenya in 2018 and Uganda the year before. But one point I should make, obviously, if you want DX cheaply, the other thing you can do to enhance your signal is to use a suitable mode. So I'm very keen on CW, and obviously you can get away with a much lower signal on CW than you can on sideband, but then FT8, and I kind of, it's something I still haven't got round to, but a lot of you will have done, I know, and it's enormously popular, and it's great that it's getting people on the air during a sunspot minimum, and I hope it just it continues and grows and develops. I'm still doing a lot of CW myself, but I'm not being like that about it. And then, of course, what about remote operating? I'm just kind of trying to demonstrate that I'm not unaware of these, but this was a talk that would have been quite different probably if I'd written it from scratch from now rather than a few years back. I think what I've said is still true, because it's always true, isn't it, that the antenna is the most important thing in a station, and you can experiment and produce great antennas without actually spending a large amount of money. And that, I think, is just about it. That's it. Don't know why I did that. Anyway, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. That was very good indeed. Very enjoyable. So let me just hand over to everyone else we've got on the call tonight. So going to the room we've got here, who wants to go with the first question or contribution to Nick? Wave at me, unmute yourself. Yeah, go on, Darren, G3RWF. Darren, you need to unmute. Darren, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Yeah.
That's
okay, got me now. Sorry,
Yeah.
couldn't find the button. Only jumped in because nobody else was doing. But just to comment on the Spider Beam mainly, I think that is probably the most cost-effective beam on the market. It's absolutely superb. The club runs one. It's never let us down yet. If I could change to one tomorrow, I definitely would do.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, 3 elements, four on 10 meters. Is it 4 on 12 as well?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Certainly on 10.
Yeah, so I mean, no, they're great. They just have that. I've always found they're quite difficult to get vertical because they're big. You need to push them up from underneath.
Yeah,
but
we've got a David with a Land Rover that can do that.
Ah, well, that's that. I think actually that cheapo master I was talking about, you could actually do it. It's a matter of just putting a few cords underneath to stop it kind of bouncing around while you're hauling it off the ground.
Yeah,
but,
no, for a few £100, they're an amazing antenna.
Yeah,
and if you want to make your own, I think all the details are on the websites anyway. You could do it even cheaper, but they're so cost effective. Why would you bother? Just buy the kit.
Well, the kit's quite a long build too. I mean, it takes you a day or so. I found. Did you do it?
Yeah. Did it about 5 years ago now. As you say, it probably took a good day overall, but it was all done indoors, all done nice and dry.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, great fun. Yeah, it was easy. Absolutely
yeah, it was
easy.
good fun. I agree. I think a lot of the time there also was, well, it was when I was doing it, was trying to make sure that I could could take it apart and put it together again.
Yeah, we made several adaptations with clips and various, but that's all part of the hobby anyway. But I think the club one we can put up now in about 35 minutes from scratch.
Yep.
Which I think is about right.
I lent mine, and it went to Ghana or somewhere, and I'm just praying that they brought it back wrapped up as it was supposed to be. I haven't checked it.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Darren. In terms of questions, we've got a number of new licensees in the room tonight, some G7s and M7s. Do you want to go with a question to Nick while we've got him? Have you been, has your interest been spiked in having an experiment with some Jubilee clips and some kitchen chopping board?
No.
No is the answer. Yeah, I'm sure they have. Yeah, go on, John, G8, JMB. John, you have to unmute. You're muted. That's it.
Unmute that. Can you hear me now?
That's it. Yeah.
Right. Thanks for a very interesting talk. You have a lot of emphasis there on beams of one sort or another, be spider beam or whatever. I'm not in a position where I can erect that. I've got a piece of wire down the garden.
Yep.
And barefoot rig. Advice, because no one ever comes back to me if I call. I don't work as a CW. I don't have the ability. I'm stuck to SSB.
Right.
And I don't believe in FT8 because that's for changing train numbers.
Well, we could have a discussion about that, couldn't we? But they don't stop those discussions. Have you got the garden back and front of the house?
There's very little at the back and very little at the front. It's all to one side. The shack's at the other end. Well,
I've always been quite keen on various forms of dipoles because I think they're centre-fed antennas, tuned antennas work well. When I lived in a house with quite a short front garden, I can remember there was this strange wire which used to find its way down to the almost to the wall.
I have some trees which you would think could be useful for hanging aerials in. However, every time the wind blows, because we're on top of a hill, they just get wiped off when branches come across them.
Yep, I have that trouble here with trees. I don't think my answer was to fill an old oil can with water and make it go up and down in the wind.
Even allowing for that, there's plenty of good system, but you find a branch blows across and just wipes it.
Yeah.
I think if we look out the southwest, there's probably nothing between us and Brazil.
Well,
so we get the prevailing winds whistle up the slope.
I mean, are you interested? Which bands are you interested in?
Well, HF generally 80-20.
80-20, yeah. I mean, have you absolutely not got room for something like a 20-meter Moxon?
No, it would have to go up from the middle of the roof, and that's not a domestic practicality.
I understand that. I
mean, what we have at the moment is a piece of wire which is probably about 25 foot high, about 90 foot long.
And what
which the effective height is a lot lower because of all the wiring in the house that's directly underneath.
Have you thought about the bit of the antenna that isn't in the air, the earthing of it?
Sorry?
Have you thought about earthing? I mean, how good's your earthing?
The earthing is...
Have you got any kind of earth mat down or...?
Well, no, what I've got outside the shack window is a couple of earth stakes. That's bonded to the central heating. We're in a long bungalow, which is exactly 20 meters long.
Yeah.
So all the central heating is bonded to that earth. It's also connected to mains earth.
I've got a load of chicken wire in the garden here, which when I put down some more grass, I put it underneath it, and so I've got quite an extensive earth mat.
Yeah, but again, that's not a very practical solution here.
Looks like you're looking for a magic antenna, really.
Well, I don't know. Am I doing something very wrong?
No, you aren't.
No.
I made a very short and rather scathing comment about ATUs, but it sounds to me like you're a proper place for an ATU, and get as much height as you can on the vertical section, and then turn the top.
Yeah, what I've got is a bit of wire, comes out the shack window, goes to a 129 transformer,
Yeah.
goes up about 28 foot, loops along the garden to a tree at the far end, about 90 foot away. And not terribly high, I suppose, if you allow for the wiring in the house as being earth in effect. It's probably about 10, 15 foot high over most of the length. It's not very practical to get it any higher.
You can't hide a pole in the tree or do anything like that. I can see the
Sorry?
You can't hide a pole in the tree. I mean, I've got a pole up inside a tree, which
I used to have a
really.
dipole going into the tree, but I got fed up with putting it back every 2 or 3 months when the wind blew. Despite it was arranged with lots of give and weights, you find something blows across it and just snaps the wire.
I think I would concentrate on 1 or 2 bands and try and I mean, even at 28 feet, that's not an unreasonable height for 20 meters. If you've got it,
yeah. No, as I say, but the effective height is probably half of that, because of all the mains earthing in the bungalow. It's directly underneath the aerial.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's quite awkward, really.
John,
I've often considered. I'm obviously at an age where bungalows might be an idea, but I think, golly, what would 60 foot look like next to a bungalow? I wouldn't get away with that.
Go on, David. David wants to dive in on this discussion. Go on, David.
Yeah.
Hi. Couple of comments, as much as questions as anything. I used to be a member, when I was a 2E0, I used to be a member of the CDXC, and I fell out with them because somebody on there made a comment that those with wires and barefoot need to up the game. And I sort of agree with that. If you want to work DX, if you want to work it from the UK, you need a beam and you need an amplifier. There's no way around it. You've got to bust the pile up, and that's the only way you can do it. Yes, you can wait and you can do this and you can do that. If you want to be able to do it and you want to be able to do it reliably, and you're stuck with voice, you need a beam and you need an amplifier, and that's just the be all and end all of it. And I've had a comment privately with one of the other guys who's on the chat, and the working DX, the key, you can do it with 5 watts. You call from Korea, people are going to come back to you. If you call from Sierra Leone, people are going to come back to you. And John, with his end fed or his long wire or his random length, would have a pile up if he was calling from Kenya. If you're calling from the UK, you know you're not going to attract attention. It's not an attractive call sign. It's, you know, you look at the most wanted list, we're about that far off the bottom rather than that far off the top. It's just not going to happen. So that's it. If you want to do it from the UK, there's no other solution other than a gain antenna of some description and high power. The QRP guys can say, oh, but if you do this, you might work them one day eventually. Look around the room. People in this room haven't got one day eventually to sit and wait for. You know, if you're going to do it, you need to use power.
I think I would. The trouble with this, I'm a member of the CDXC, and there's a temptation with people who are near the top of, you know, the top of the honours list and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they are going to have to compete at that level. I think the point I was trying to make at the beginning was that there are quite a lot of other places that are quite interesting to a lot of people, and they still deserve attention. And I still think people who actually go there will for quite a modest sum of money,
for sure,
they would have quite a good time.
There's some UK
question was obviously if you're totally stuck for antenna, the answer is get a linear. You're right. I agree with you. But I can only say I don't permanently have a beam. I mean, I have the advantage of a very high wire. Well, 60 feet is fairly high. Like if you choose your bands carefully, I mean, 10 megs, for example, when the times are right with the Expeditions is a place you can work almost anywhere on with a wire antenna. But if you're trying to compete on, say, 20 meters, I would agree you have a tough time. That's why I've put this Moxon beam in my garden. I'm suggesting a cheap way of doing it.
If you're somewhere rare, it doesn't matter what you use. You could use. He's not here tonight. I would say it to his face, but Gerald at the club, I'll load up a bed mattress. I'll load up the bed springs in a mattress. If you do that from somewhere rare, you'll still get a pilot. If you do that from the UK, you might work Bob down the road. You know, if you're going to be in the UK, you've got to do something like. I mean, John made a comment about FT8 swapping train numbers. You've got to do something either like that or use power or get gain from somewhere. Whether it's gain from the amplifier or gain from your antenna, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, we're also on electrically, like suburban. It's very noisy.
Yeah, I've got Russell next. Let's take Russell into discussion.
I would half agree with Dave. And so I've been chasing DX now for the grand total of 6 weeks. I started created myself a logbook of the world account at the beginning of August, or the end of July rather, beginning of August, and I built myself 2 antennas. I've got one for 10 meters and one for 20 meters. I have to take them down after every time I use them because I'm currently ensconced in my girlfriend's house. I've used FT8 and SSB. I've worked 68 countries in 6 weeks, and I'm pretty pleased with the results. My 20-meter antenna is a quarter wave vertical. I've got a 12-meter, one of those fiberglass poles. It goes up when the antenna's up. It comes down when the antenna's down. And the neighbours notice it's up, they notice it's down. Sometimes they say, oh, you're on your radio. And yeah, I've had a great time. So, John, I'd say you can embrace those train spotted numbers, or you can chat away on SSB. It's worked for me, but the bit I'd agree with David with is that half of my contacts have been since I went QRO, which was 7 days ago. I bought myself an ACOM linear, and yeah, I've worked 20 of those 68 countries since then. You need something, as David says, to stand out. You know, on FT8 you can use PSK Reporter, you can see who is copying you, and now I can see it's most of the world. They just don't want to come back because you don't have a good call sign.
There seems to be a reluctance these days to actually want to just work QSA as opposed to sitting waiting to pounce. But I think that's
yeah. So you mean, you know, you can see who can hear you, but half the time they don't want to talk to you. They want to talk to somebody with a, you know.
I mean, I agree the point, of course, about power and beams, but of course we're into the art of the possible, aren't we? If we live in the UK, just as a kind of a bit of an aside in a way, and that is that you may be somewhere that's vaguely interesting in terms of the call sign, but there are still periods of time when you can't make yourself heard if you haven't got a reasonable antenna. And you have and that's why I moved from dipoles, which worked well, to a Moxon beam, because that gave me some gain and didn't give me an amplifier in my luggage.
Yes,
and that was because in the end, if you draw, think of great circle bearings, for example. You look at, say, East Africa and the States. The line goes virtually through the UK, and actually you find certain times of the day everybody's turned on the States in a contest, for example, working stateside, and you can be at the back. You're in quite an interesting place. You know people like to work you, but they actually don't listen to you at all. You need to be loud enough to be heard. So I'm kind of saying that's a slightly similar situation in a way, that there are situations where you need to be loud enough to be heard, almost
completely
regardless
agree.
of where you are.
If you've got the real estate to put the beam up, go for the beam. If you haven't, unfortunately, well, you know, there's a linear here. It's quite small. It sits under the desk, and that makes up for the fact that all I've got is a few feet at the end of the garden.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
I've got Terry next, and then who's after Terry? Someone else said.
Okay. Well, my first reaction is choose a call sign that sounds a bit strange and see what that does for you. But just moving, if I may, just away from aerials and what have you. Nick, you took the other approach and just went around the world to interesting places and thus had contacts. How did you manage to do that on a shoestring? You talked about VSOs and other things, but you seem to have managed to do it very long term, and I take my hat off to you. Maybe you could share some of the this is how I did it.
Well, when I went to the time I spent in Uganda, a lot of time I spent in Uganda, well, I'll tell you what the deal was. The deal was that I got myself there, so I paid for the air ticket, and I was provided with they provided accommodation, and I fed myself. And at one stage they said that they would provide transport too, but that kind of promise disappeared. But it was good for my physique, I think, generally. So what I was doing actually was doing I was working and doing amateur radio at the same time. And if you're doing consultancy type of work, I mean that isn't all day work, if you know what I mean, either. So you can go and do consultancy when the bands are pretty poor. No, I didn't say that. But that's how I did that. Yeah.
But you weren't a consultant at age 17. Or even 23, I might guess. But
no, I was.
you got yourself...
When I was doing voluntary service. No, but as I said, I didn't take anything with me at all. But I was 18 actually. I was straight from school. In those days, you could do VSO straight from school, and I was fortunate to be able to do some amateur radio. Really, I could have easily been in a place where there were no radio amateurs and nobody around to actually. I mean, they were very friendly. I mean, I think that's an aspect of amateur radio which has always been appealing to me. I mean, there were some very friendly and helpful people. There's some of the others too, but you know, the world's an interesting place, isn't it?
Yeah, my hat off to you anyway for seeing it so frequently from the other end of the pile-up. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the point about QRP, what am I saying? If anybody's heard Andy, G3AB, who's in Kenya at the moment, ZC4VJ now, is doing FT8. I was talking to him the other day on the computer, of course, and he was saying he's actually been locked in his flat now since the beginning of lockdown. He's been there for 5 months, never been out, but he's working FT8 on a bit of string. But I think he's got a linear running, to pick up your point, David.
Okay, someone else said they had a question. Someone else was saying, Darren, he wants to come back.
Yes, the only other thing I would say is don't forget verticals. Again, another area of the club use a lot is the Camerons, the DX Commander. Tremendous vertical. Again, low cost, and every time we've used it with the club, and I've used it personally as well, it works. You don't have to be by the sea. It's not a loaded vertical, it's a proper quarter wave, and it works. Again, you don't have to spend mega bucks. You can go out and buy the Hushcrafts and the Hustlers and things like that, and spend a lot of money. But the DX Commander is not expensive. All the information again is on the website. You can make your own for less than £200, and it's a cracking aerial.
I'd agree with that. I had a 7,000 or something at one stage, which is a Cushcraft vertical. It's not particularly cheap, but that worked well. And I had that mounted entirely on the roof because it's got so-called radials. It's a kind of centre-fed dipole, actually, vertical, but it's very good. I'd agree. I should have said that earlier. I was thinking cheap.
Yep, it is cheap though in comparison with a lot of aerials.
Oh, that's
I think
true.
a lot of us have spent a lot of money over the years on aerials that don't work.
Yep.
And in my opinion, if you want a good beam, it's a spider beam. If you want a vertical, it's the DX Commander. And they're probably the two cheapest commercially made aerials on the market. And they both work better than anything.
I've always been wary of traps. That's just a thing.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no traps on any of those.
I think most of the antennas that don't work very well have got traps on them.
Correct.
They either weren't designed right or they fill up with water or all sorts of things.
Yeah. I'm going to use the DX Commander mobile. What do you think?
Yeah. Mobile. I gave up mobile a long time ago when I almost killed myself. I was lucky to escape, and so were other people. I think I was above the Manchester Ship Canal at the time. That was a long, long time ago. I must have been mad. Well, I was. You can see.
We all are.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Anyone else wants to come on this discussion? Yeah, Roger.
Hi. I know Ken wants to go in as well, but while you're eating, Ken. Yeah, thanks, Nick. Interesting. I take your point about the aluminium poles, the down pipes, plastic pipes, bamboo, and everything. I just wondered about how you compare the using a standard sort of fishing rod style thing with a more professional kind of expandable pole. Are they worth the extra cost? For the not just the weight, but the flexibility they give you and the usability, the strength, etc.
I think you've got to use the fishing. You've got to use the fishing rods for the jobs that they can do. I mean, some jobs you can't do with a fishing rod. Anything that's got to carry a lot of weight on the end is a bit of a problem. That's why Moxons work quite well, because you can use pretty thin wire on Moxons. They don't carry much weight, actually. So surprising. And I wouldn't. In fact, there's a friend near here who just made a Moxon using aluminium poles, and he and I, because I was trying to help him. I mean, we were quite surprised by how heavy it turned out to be compared with one that's made entirely of fiberglass poles. So, I mean, for that, it's great. For supporting a dipole in a rather wafty way of the pictures I've shown you this evening, it's okay, but I wouldn't leave it up for too long. The ones that I had up in Uganda rather, if I was there for 2 months, I used to take them down after 1 month and go over all the connections and pull them tight again and make sure they weren't going to fall out. But I think those fishing poles are terrific. I mean, I went up the Lake District a few weeks ago and just tossed one in the car and went up on the top of the hill and put up a dipole for a bit and nattered away. And I think for that they're great. So it's about horses for courses, really.
So temporary use, temporary,
yeah.
more than permanent.
Yes, I think the only probably more permanent job for them would be in a Moxon antenna or in well, no, actually of course the spider beam's got specially made fiberglass sections, doesn't it? And they're quite a lot stronger, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Did you want to come in, Ken?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, no problem.
Try to see.
Nick, just for your information, I'm the author of the article that was in Practical Wireless last month about HF DXing by the sea.
Oh, good. Right.
And that was on the trolley, on a shopping trolley with a vertical on it.
Have I worked you on your shopping trolley?
Yeah,
I'm sure I worked you a few times from Uganda.
I think so.
Yeah, funnily enough, the shopping trolley caught my attention.
Yeah. Now, I put a comment on here on chat, actually, because I think for anyone working from home, so that's not near the sea, and they want to put an aerial up that's cheap, I would go for a vertical dipole, not needing an earth system, centre-fed, open wire feeder, multi-banded, and supported either from a tree by either catapulting a wire over and or a fishing pole, which you can take up and down whenever you go on, and multi-banding it with the open wire feeder. And I'll guarantee, I know what Dave said about needing a linear and a beam, but I would imagine that let him run his 400 watts and run a lot more than 400, and let him use his hex beam, but still the vertical dipole in the clear will give him a run for his money. Make no doubt about that. And my only thoughts about beams are, yes, but you've got to leave them up in the air. You can't be taking a hex beam down every time you want to go on the radio and winding it up when you want to go back on, because it looks bigger when it's lower than what it does when it's higher. So there was another antenna, which is a multi-banded raised feed point vertical antenna, and I can't think of the name of it. It's in the American it's in the American magazine, but well, I know the Cushcraft that you mentioned earlier. I mean, you could. They don't make them anymore. You could have had. I mean, you could have a Cushcraft R5, which is a half wave end fed vertical.
Yeah.
And you've got to get them up on the chimney or somewhere very high up.
That's what mine was.
And they're good antennas, but they don't make them now. They've replaced it with another one, which I think is a 3-bander, and I can't remember which one it is. Cushcraft MV3 seems to spring to mind. MV3. But if you're in a suburban garden, you can't put big beams up. And let's be right, a spider beam's got fairly big sides on it. I would go for the vertical dipole every time.
Thank you for that. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go on,
That's
David.
great about antennas. There's so many different facets to it.
Yeah, I have to disagree with that. Am I on mute? I can't see. Let me just tap
we
here.
can hear
Yeah,
you.
sorry. I'm not at home, so I've got poor kit here. I have to disagree with Ken about the hex beam. My hex beam is in a ski bag. It's in the utility room, and when there's a major contest or a big DX station on, it goes outside and it goes up. And then when I've managed to work them or I've done the contest, it comes down and it goes back inside. Excuse me, I can't leave it up. I can't leave it up all the time. It takes me 35 minutes to put a hex beam up. Yeah, and that's to get a hex beam at 30 feet. Yes, the vertical dipoles are great. At home, I've got a fan dipole that's up all the time, and that works most of the time. But when you're wanting the gain that Nick was talking about, and he was talking about spider beams and the vertical arrays and things like that, you can just bob them up. They don't take a long time to build. The first time you build any of them, whether it's a DX Commander, a spider beam, or a hex beam, they take a whole day. But after you've done it a few times, you can put them up and down. And I've sold about 6 hex beams now, and people, you know, I'll send a video of it going up. I've taken a time-lapse video from my CCTV at home, and it's 35 minutes from the ski bag hitting the grass to the QSO.
Is this one you made yourself?
I make them and I sell them, yeah.
I do, right. Because I'm the one I showed you, which was the German one. There's a wonderful video actually. People say, "How easy? Just like putting up an umbrella." Yes, it's certainly.
Oh, you shake it, and yeah. I've seen that video, and that one's made. It looks as though it's made from thin tent type poles, and there's one of the groups that goes to Newark every year. That has the transit van, and I think it's Essex Ham that has the transit van with the mast. They have one of those folding hex beams, and they are very, very good, and they're lightweight. But the cost on them is now they're astronomical. They're £600-700 now with those.
Really, I think I've paid like 200 quid or something for them.
Yeah, no, you won't even get a standard hex beam for that now. Even the fiberglass alone at trade for a standard hex beam is approaching £200 just for the fiberglass.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Talking of things, I mean, my view of aerials is they're made out of bits of wire that I've got. several £100. Can't justify that for an
It-
occasional use.
It's okay, David saying what he's saying, and I don't disagree with David. I actually agree with 50% of what he said earlier. Having built cubicle quads, built wide space beams and multi-element wide space beams, it's all very well, but if David hears a station coming through tonight from Rwanda, is he going to go outside and spend 38 or 35 minutes putting this together in the dark when you could have a vertical dipole where all he's got to do is go outside and push it up in 2 or 3 minutes, and that's the difference.
No, my dipole at home lives up all the time. I've got a fan dipole that's up all the time, and the other stuff goes up when there's a big expedition on. So if I hear on the GB2RS, or I look in the RSGB in the Radcom, and I see that Nick's got a new trip coming up, or VP8 was coming up, or K1N's coming up, then I put something special up for that, or I put something special up for WPX or CQWW. But yeah, I can't do it for just one call. That's not going to happen.
And can you do it in the dark at 9 o'clock at night?
There's floodlights in the garden, but yeah. I wouldn't, because by the time it gets dark, I've usually had a lot of this.
I think you and I behave in slightly the same way, David, because that's what I'm trying to do, is to get a beam that I put up just for the odd weekend.
Yeah,
I try to make it as simple as possible to put up.
I'm in a suburban garden. Similar situation, I should imagine, to John there. I've got, when my hex beam is on the ground, it touches both of my boundaries.
Wow.
You know, so, but then I've got a crank up tower that it goes on, and it goes up to 30 feet. So it's up to 10 meters, it clears the rooftop. But I know there's other guys have great success with nested dipoles, like cobwebs and things like that. And they do work. But if there's somebody rare on, you've either got to do CW, you've got to do FT8, or you've got to use power. Or gain. Power's the wrong term. You've got to use gain.
You've got to use a combination of those, Dave. Power and FT8 or something.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, a common. We're going away from Nick's talk now, aren't we? But a common misconception.
I think I should have been
about FT8 is that it's a low power mode. It's not. It's a weak signal mode. In the past, I've certainly put some coal on the fire when I've been using FT8.
I can't see any attraction for FT8, as I say. I'd like to talk to people. I'm not interested in swapping train.
But that's why the hobby's as broad as it is, isn't it? I'm not interested in going on Top Band and discussing bunions and hemorrhoids. No. I know. But you know, the hobby is massive, isn't it? We can all do what we want to do. Some people like to do FT8. Some people like to chase DXCCs. So you're just going to go on, work the DX, get a signal report. It's going to be 5 and 9, whatever it is. You go on and you've worked them, and you get your card or you get your tick on your logbook of the world. You fill in your grid. Some people like to work special events. Some people like to go on exotic holidays and work put on a DX station. We all have lots of different things that we like to do, and I've ridiculed going on Top Band and talking about medical illnesses the same way you've ridiculed
anybody on
talking about
nice.
The same way you've ridiculed F28. You know, we have lots of things.
I said it's not my thing.
Train's fine.
Yeah. Dave, I've spent the last 40 years on Top Band talking about my medical things. This DX thing's a new thing for me.
Hey, I tell you what, when you get to 99, Russell, get in that last one, and you'll work them, and you'll be checking Logbook of the World every hour.
I'm already doing
confirmation.
It. Who's confirmed?
Yeah,
I had to work 14 bloody Turkish stations to get one of them to confirm.
Yeah.
If you set your cluster up correctly, it will show the ones that are on, the used logbook of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, guys, should we
Sorry,
bring this?
Nick.
No. Should we bring it to an end? I'd like to thank Nick very much indeed.
Can I have a quick question before you close down?
Go on, Richard. Yeah, go on.
Nick, you said that you were born in Leeds, so you must be a loiner. Is that right?
I wasn't born in Leeds. No, afraid not. I can't
No?
claim that.
Did you live in Leeds?
I lived in Leeds, yes.
All right, when? Where did you do your RE? Where did you get your exam? It's got to be before 1974.
Oh, gracious. I've been licensed in 1963.
All right.
I'm trying...
You lived in Nuneaton, didn't you, in 1974?
I did my RA in Leeds. No, I didn't. No, sorry, I did in Newcastle.
Newcastle, all right.
Yeah.
I just got this book here. I don't know if you can see it.
Read it.
Hang on. Oh. Can you read? Is that in focus?
I can't read that.
No. It says, in fact, funny enough, you know what that is, don't you?
A logbook, by the look of it?
No, it's a punch card off the IBM PCs.
Oh, I
Where
see.
you programmed them. And it was on this page. And it says that you were in Nuneaton. Well, this is a
That's true.
1978 edition.
That's correct.
Call book. And funny enough, when I looked at it, I come straight to it because on the next page, I've got General Edinburgh. Oh, G3SDY, what people were on about. And that's his number at Kirkburton. What is it? Kirkburton 2905. So, oh, no, fair enough then. Because
you're tracking. No, I can't claim to be Yorkshireman, but I'm just telling you I've been there. I think
that's all I was going to say.
I think most of my brothers might make a bit of a claim because they went to school there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Richard. And Nick, thanks very much indeed for your chat tonight. It was great fun. I tell you, the bit I loved was the bottle insulators on the wire antennas. And I think there's a number of us in the room here, I count myself amongst them, who will do anything to avoid spending a large amount of money to get aerials to work. And I think Darren said the DX commander, Callum, who set his little business up selling them, is basically developed a very nice constructed multi-band vertical antenna. And I've done exactly the same thing without even spending Callum's £100 on it. I've got wires for 10, 15 and 20 quarter-wave verticals going up a tree in my garden, fed against wires which are buried in the grass. And I can, is Russell still here? I think Russell's disappeared. I've worked all over the world, certainly considerably more than 100 countries with that. So you can.
I'm still here, Nick. It sounds interesting.
You honestly can. You can really. Yeah, still there, Russell. Sorry, I didn't see you. You honestly can. So look, can I just bring the formal bit of the meeting to end? Nick, brilliant to see you, and thanks for coming along. Can we show our appreciation, guys, to Nick for his contribution tonight? So
thank you, folks. It's been really good to be with you, and I particularly enjoyed the chat at the end. Great.
All right, brilliant. Okay, cheers.
Cheers all my weaknesses. Thanks a lot.